So today, after so many days of rain, the sun comes out. And just as rainy days are actually very good for the practice, the first sunny day can be a real struggle. After the 4 o'clock sit, all I wanted to do was go for a nice walk. It's such a beautiful day. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who had that thought. But you stayed here and you practiced. It's actually a beautiful thing. Because we all want happiness. We all came here because we want happiness and peace of mind. Somebody said in their report, it's like, I'm in a hell realm. It can be like that in the practice sometimes. And so why do we practice Vipassana anyway? What are we here doing? So when you look at the texts and the commentaries, basically they list 3 kinds of happiness. Conventional, common garden variety happiness. Going for that walk. Any kind of pleasant sense experience. All of that.
Common or pleasant?
Pleasant sense experience.
Piacevole.
All of that activity of getting something, having something, being someone. Our conventional happiness or unhappiness depends very much on conditions. It's fragile. One little change and boom, we're not happy anymore. And nothing does it for us. Nothing really fulfills, gives us lasting happiness. I mean, I don't have to give many examples. I'm sure you all have your own. Yeah, it's that moment of you buy a new car and then somebody, you know, in a parking lot puts a big dent in it. It's like, oh, you went from happiness to unhappiness. You know, it's like that, big and small ways in life. So we all seek a deeper and more lasting sense of happiness than that. Something that isn't so transient and unreliable. So we come here and we find our own particular little hell realm and we seeking happiness. In the practice, we can also find happiness, practice-related happiness. And these beautiful states of openness, peacefulness, calm, tranquility, joy that we can access in the practice. Not to mention the very pleasant state that arises when unwholesome mind states are temporarily gone. Extremely pleasant. This kind of happiness is much more refined than worldly happiness. And of course it's more wholesome, but it doesn't last either. These experiences in the practice of, concentration, joy. And you have all experienced this probably 100 times today in big and small ways. The practice goes up and down and up and down and up and down. If we don't cling on to this and continue the practice, then we can drop into and access deep insight. And deep insight that permanently uproots unwholesome states. Stage by stage, attaining ultimately complete freedom of mind, nibbana. This is, of course, the most sublime happiness, and it's true happiness. And even though we can think about it, it doesn't actually manifest through reflection, through contemplation, through study. It only manifests through practice. So this deep happiness of freedom is something that arises spontaneously, that we don't control when it comes. We cannot know when it will arise. Insight, no matter how small, but especially big insight, is always a surprise. It's like, whoa, no one ever told me about this. And we create the conditions for that to happen. We don't create that, but we create the conditions for that to happen. And no matter how you feel in a moment of practice, it could arise in the next moment. Who knows? It's like that. And how we create the conditions for that to arise depends very much on one particular mind state. You know, you all know it because you've been practicing it all day. Sati, mindfulness. It's not the end of the practice, it's the main tool of the practice. It's the means by which we cultivate the path, the means by which we see clearly so that wisdom can arise. So when that thought arises, it's like, why do I have to keep watching one step after another, one breath after another? And those moments of what can feel, honestly, sometimes like toxic boredom. Please know it is by collecting data that we see clearly. Is anybody here a scientist? 2, 3. Any of you know, I used to be one too. You can't kind of run away from that. I guess I still am in a different way. But anyone who does science as an activity knows the more data points you collect, the stronger your conclusions. If you have one data point, you have 0 degrees of freedom in statistics. In statistics, you have one data point. Mm-hmm. It's called, you have 0 degrees of freedom. So you can't really draw any conclusions from one data point, let alone 10 or 100. And in the practice, it's like that. Each moment of clear observation of something is a data point. The other thing any scientist will tell you is how deadly boring science can be sometimes. You just collect data, and it's like, it's like that here too. So we're here, we collect data with this tool we call Sati. And I want to spend the rest of the talk speaking about Sati because it's so important. I like to use the Pali because in translation it's really hard to pin down a meaning. It has a wide scope. Generally, people think we are aware. We know we're walking down the street. And so it gets confusing when people translate Sati as awareness. It is awareness, but it's not that kind of general, day-to-day, conventional awareness. Mahasi Sayadaw says when he's talking about Sati, you might ask, doesn't a dog know he's walking down the street? And he answers his own question by saying, certainly, but that's not what I mean. Ordinary awareness, ordinary consciousness is not Sati at all, actually. It can be quite clouded. So in our ordinary day-to-day life, our ordinary consciousness, we take fleeting sense impressions, sense consciousnesses together. We take sense consciousness as a basis for everything we perceive and know. And in Pali, the word for this is not Sati, it's vijnana. It's just the basic meeting of a functional sense organ, like the eye, an obvious visual object, and the meeting of those. So we take as the basis for our ordinary day-to-day life all of this fleeting vijnana from all of our physical senses. And we take those and we create instantly at the same time as that sense consciousness happens. We create categories and make assumptions about this and package it together as a perception. This perception is basically the frame around that experience by way of which we make sense of it. So we have, each of us opens our eyes and, we see something. The basic sense experience is fleeting moments of form and color. And we make sense of that by saying to ourselves, well, this is the meditation hall, and that's Jürgen, and we have names for everybody, and this is a book, and this is a bell. Oh, and then there's hearing consciousness, and that's the sound of the bell. This is a clock. We have all these concepts that we take to be reality, and we take it all for granted. But any of you who have had children know that a lot of what you do with infants is you teach them names for things, starting with mama, papa, and flower, bird, tree. And, these are all perceptions. There's a wonderful story in a book by Oliver Sacks, who was both a writer and a neurologist and a totally wonderful human being. He died a couple of years ago. And it was a story of a French man who had been born with sight, but who had lost his sight in childhood from some disease. And he had made a life for himself as a massage therapist, something he could do without needing to see. And I can only imagine without sight you would be a wonderful massage therapist because so much sensitivity in your hands. Then in middle age, the doctors realized they could reverse the blindness. So he had an operation, had surgery. And the story in this book is the account of his experiences when they took the bandages off his eyes for the first time. And he said he saw this moving kind of array of color and form, but he could only make sense of it when he heard his surgeon's voice saying, "Do you see me?" Or "What do you see?" right in front of him. And he realized all this stuff was actually his surgeon's face. There was no perception there of face. So we have these perceptions and we take them for granted. Here's another example. You look at this and you can read it because you've learned what each of those letters are and you know how to put them together. And once you know how to do it, you can't undo that. You can't unsee that. It's just the way it is. This is words on a piece of paper. But when you first encounter something like Burmese, it's like, oh, that's pretty, but you certainly can't read it. It's just all these circles. So perception. And then we take all these perceptions, and if we feed them, they turn into views, opinions, entrenched thoughts about the way things are. And we don't even consider the fact that that is a distortion, or that there are distortions in that process. We take it as what's real. So our regular, everyday awareness is colored by delusion, and we don't even know it. And it's not just things like perception, it's the nature of reality is distorted to us. For example, if you stand at the bank of a river and you look at it, you think of it as a thing. It's a river, right? But there is nothing there that lasts, that is stable, that, it's just movement. This is constant movement. Or the solidity of the floor, for example. Matter is 99.9999, I don't know how many decimal points out, percent space. And we take it to be solid and enduring and unchanging. But it's constantly moving. And it's mostly space. Or if these fans were on, you can see that there are 4 blades on each of those fans. But if you turn them on, it looks like a solid disc. My work as a scientist, we used to be ferried here and there on helicopters. And the pilot always says, "Don't go back. There's a tail rotor there. You don't want to get in, all you see is this disc. But if you walk into it, it'll kill you." So there is this basic delusion we all suffer from, and we don't think of it as delusion. And an even deeper level on how we perceive ourselves, the nature of this experience that we call I, me, and mine. There's so much distortion of view in that. And then we respond to that with greed, with aversion, with delusion, more delusion. Unacknowledged and unseen, all of this completely shapes the way we experience the world and view each other. In Burma, they speak about the nature of greed, aversion, and delusion, these 3 unwholesome roots in Buddhism, as being like thieves. To be successful, they need darkness. And any of you who have been to Burma know that at night, there are lights on everywhere. It drives us Westerners crazy. We can't sleep. But all around all the buildings, there's light. Because if there's light, nobody can get up to any trouble. And it's the same internally. When we see greed, aversion, delusion, when we see these distortions, they can't do any damage. So mindfulness, of course, mindfulness is what allows us to see through this mass of darkness, to see the real nature of mind and body directly and deeply. Somebody today was asking us, sound. Is it okay if I'm hearing things in a different way? We begin to experience the world in a very different way when mindfulness becomes strong. Sayadaw U Pandita always spoke about a metaphor he liked very much. He says, imagine you're walking down the path and you see ahead of you, you see something that looks like a snake or a rope. And from a distance there's that moment of confusion or even fear if you think it's a snake. It's like, oh, what's that? But as you draw closer to it, you see that it's actually moving. The little parts of it are moving. It's not one solid thing. It's only when you get quite close that you see it's a moving line of ants. And this is actually a very good metaphor, because you see it's all these little tiny things, but from a distance it looks solid. And in Burma, April, not so much May, but April, when it's very, very hot before the rains come, the colonies of ants, they come out and they do that. They move, and you'll see like 2.5, 3 centimeter wide lines of ants, and it's quite remarkable. They do look from a distance like something solid across the path. So the quality of mindfulness we need to see this line of ants, as opposed to seeing a rope or a snake, the metaphor, seeing beneath all of these misperceptions, is what U Pandita used to call extraordinary mindfulness, as opposed to ordinary mindfulness. And he used to talk a lot. He'd have a whole talk for a whole hour about the word satipatthana and the particle in there, pa. And that particle implies plunging into or rushing towards. And this extraordinary mindfulness it plunges into experience in a very precise way. We see very clearly and deeply. The commentaries speak of it as being like a stone thrown into a body of water that just sinks to the bottom, as opposed to a hollow gourd that just kind of floats around on the surface. And then what the other thing U Pandita used to speak about is the rest of that word, satipatthana, 2 possible roots implying both persistence and outstandingness. So the full meaning of the word, the flavor of that word, is extraordinary, persistent, deep awareness. He used to say, ordinary mindfulness has no place in a meditation center. I assume he got that from Mahasi Sayadaw, who's standing right above Iris, giving me the eye. We polish our capacity to see things by looking. We don't start the practice with this extraordinary mindfulness. So please don't be discouraged by this kind of meaning of mindfulness, thinking, oh, I don't have that. It comes with the looking. The more you look, the more you see. And the more precisely you can see. So, for example, the rising and falling of the chest with the breath. At first, no matter how carefully you look, it's just You know, there's nothing. It's just, oh yeah, there's movement there, but I can't tell actually what it is. And this is where boredom can become a problem. Why am I looking at this? This is just like all day long. But then there is a moment for everybody, actually. If you persist patiently with this, you see the beginning of it. It's like, oh, right there. I see the beginning of that. Or there's some part of that that turns into something very clear. And so you see that one moment that you can see clearly, and then another, and then another, and another. And pretty soon, oh wow, I had no idea there was so much in here. Or perhaps your back or your knee or your shoulder, there's something that happens in there at about a half an hour into the sitting that's really unpleasant. Calls your attention. The first perception is, my knee hurts. You keep looking beneath that mass of perception that is labeled as my knee hurts. And you see it as hardness, tightness, burning, pressure. You see it as discrete physical experiences. And then it can turn into just little Christmas lights. Everything's moving and there's nothing that you can call my knee or the pain. It's just this cloud of little moving sensations, which is why we need continuity of mindfulness. It's only with collecting a ton of data that that begins to emerge. So we need extraordinary mindfulness, and through continuity of that, we begin to see clearly. The other aspect of mindfulness that that seems silly when you speak of it, but is essential, is we have to practice in real time, now. Mindfulness needs to be of the present moment. And it's astonishing and sometimes embarrassing how in formal practice we don't do this. I was watching my own mind today as it leapt from the past over the present moment into the future, again and again and again, and back to the past and into the future. It's like the mind wanting to live in the past or thinking about the future constantly. And it doesn't even need to come with any anxiety. In my case, it was just random. We abide in the present moment, but sometimes it seems like it's the hardest thing to do. Really to land here, right now, 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 now. So this extraordinary mindfulness, we apply it in all realms of our experience. This, of course, is, expressed in the 4 foundations of mindfulness, but really you don't even have to know that. It's just mind and body. Anything is something to be mindful of. So by applying this over and over again, we get a clear view of the nature of reality. And this is what leads to happiness. Because any difficulties we encounter are met with this mindfulness. This cannot be overstated. Anything that is difficult or unpleasant in the practice is your doorway into insight. They're your doorway into happiness. The Buddha spoke about the first noble truth as the noble truth of dukkha. And this is a whole talk in itself. But it's called the noble truth because it is ennobling, it leads to freedom. So, for example, we're sitting here, we're minding our own business, and we're having a reasonably pleasant sitting. Constant concentration, there's lightness, it's really quite nice. And then there is that really annoying sound because somebody nearby us is breathing too loudly and moving a lot. It's distracting us, it's unpleasant, we want it to go away. If we take a moment to be mindful in that very moment now of that mind state, we really begin to understand. It's like it's not the person next to me that's the problem. It's because that pleasant experience disappeared in a moment. And when we apply mindfulness, we see this everywhere. We see pleasantness disappearing over and over and over again. We're in the dining room, and we take the first bite of lunch, and it's so pleasant. And we chew, and we're mindful of that process. At some point, that really pleasant experience turns into, ugh, and we swallow. We collect data like this. And it could be simple. It could be, like the sunny day turned cloudy, but it could be moment to moment to moment, some very precise small thing. And through this, we develop this understanding that's actually quite profound. Often in retrospect, frankly, but again and again and again, we see it. Every conditioned thing is not a place where satisfaction lives. And a huge part of practice is letting this in, letting the bigness of this in. And as we observe this, we begin to see more and more clearly, with this precise mindfulness, what's happening there, how we're constructing that experience. We see this flow of experience over and over, and we see the only time there's difficulty is when we're grasping at some aspect of it. Or the flip side of that, which is basically the same thing. We hate some aspect of it. We really get it. It's never what's happening on the outside that's the problem. It's not that person moving next to us. It's how we're relating to that. And with that, the world can be what it is. We don't want to get involved with that suffering anymore. We just let it be. And that experience can be quite spontaneous and quite, wow, oh, whoa. Suddenly there's not any experience of suffering, even though the sound is the same, the experience in the knee is the same, it's like, oh, it's totally fine. We put it down. We abandon it, the suffering. But what we're actually putting down is not the suffering itself, but how we created the origin of that, the clinging that causes that. All it takes is one moment of this to change how we relate to the world. Because in that moment, we have realized the end of suffering and that deeper happiness that we've been seeking. And yeah, the suffering might be back in the next moment. The clinging might be back the next moment. But the more we look, the more we cultivate this, we realize that there is a path. There is a way to get to that. And we can access that. So the more we experience that, the more we want to walk that path. So mindfulness takes us there. With this repeatedly applied, those insights, those basic four things, which is the Four Noble Truths, we deepen and deepen and deepen our experience of that. We access the happiness we have been seeking. Okay. Wisdom arises by itself. We don't cause it to arise. But using this powerful tool of extraordinary mindfulness, this is what gives it the conditions to arise. One of the things. It is, of course, not the only thing we need, but it is the one factor of the path that we cannot have too much of. It balances everything. So, Sati, it is precious. I want to close with one of my favorite quotes from the Majjhima Nikaya. There's 2 or 3 suttas that contain a particular verse, and it was very, very clear from the framing stories of the sutta that people memorized this verse at the time of the Buddha. And I really love it. So it goes like this. Let one not revive the past, or on the future build his hopes, for the past has been left behind. Instead, with insight, let him see each presently arisen state. Let him know that and be sure of it, invincibly, unshakably. One who dwells thus by day, by night, it is he, the peaceful sage has said, who has one fortunate night. It's a funny construction.
Sati.
One who dwells thus invincibly, unshakably, it is he who has one fortunate night. So the Buddha has said. Yeah. The first time I heard this, it was another translation, and it was one fortunate attachment. Be here now with that extraordinary mindfulness. We can post the whole verse. I'll post it for you. So, may we all, through this extraordinary mindfulness and one fortunate night, or one fortunate attachment, find the happiness we seek that is deeper, the deepest possible happiness, which is peace. Thank you for your kind attention, everybody. Let's just let those words.
Grazie.